Marjorie says that Steve smiled for the first time in days when he saw the outpouring of love from people all over the world and whispered, "I didn't know I meant that much to so many." This amazing wave of support not only lifted his family, but also Steve. Steve Harvey's legacy was already greater than anything illness could take away. He had lived a life full of purpose, and the love he had poured into people through humor, truth, and wisdom was now returning to him in the most beautiful way. With the world holding its breath, waiting for updates, the Harvey family took a moment to reflect not on what they had lost, but on what Steve had built. In a recent message, Marjorie spoke quietly but powerfully. "Steve gave this world all he had, and now we're holding on to everything he gave us." Her remarks were repeated by the children, who referred to their father as their hero, their guide, and their compass in life, regardless of what the future brings. In his quiet moments, Steve also started to reflect, not with fear but with peace. He had come from humble beginnings, worked harder than most could imagine, and reached heights even he couldn't believe. They said he taught them how to stand tall even when life knocks you down, how to love deeply, and how to live fully without regret. More than his fame or wealth, though, he was proud of the man he had become, the man who could look his family in the eyes and say, "I did my best." He found joy in every soul he had ever touched, strength in faith, courage, and love, and he never lost faith in the power of grace, even during his darkest moments. The world also started to change its focus, from fear to honor, from discussing Steve's illness to discussing what he meant to the globe. His name was spoken with reverence, his legacy was proudly shared, and his words were passed down like priceless wisdom. It became evident that Steve Harvey would never really be gone. He had sown seeds in the hearts of millions, and those seeds would continue to grow. Schools showed clips of his inspirational speeches, churches quoted him in sermons, and families gathered to watch old episodes of his shows, laughing through their tears. The future is uncertain. The treatment may or may not be successful, and there are still many obstacles to overcome. But one thing is for sure, Steve Harvey's life is already a tale of fortitude, purpose, and most importantly, love. Whether he goes back on stage or just sits with his family by his side and watches the sunrise, his voice will reverberate for generations to come, and he will always live on in the hearts of everyone who admired him, loved him, and were impacted by him. They felt something this time, though, that they hadn't felt in a long time. I hope, as soon as they learned the news, the supporters erupted in support. Encouragement messages came pouring in. Churches and social media groups began to form prayer chains. Trending hashtags included #HopeForSteve and #KeepFightingSteve. From ardent supporters to others who had only recently become aware of him, everyone had one goal in mind: to see him prevail in this conflict. And the atmosphere changed for the first time in weeks. Saying farewell wasn't the only thing left to do. Fighting for one more sunrise, one more laugh, and one more moment with the man who brought so much joy to so many others was the goal. Steve Harvey had stated that he was not finished yet, despite the fact that the road ahead was still unclear. Amazing things started to happen as word spread about the potential therapy. This time, the world's response was one of unwavering love, solidarity, and prayer rather than sorrow. Steve Harvey supporters united from large cities to tiny ones, in a manner rarely seen by celebrities. It was a movement rather than merely a response. People who had grown up watching his broadcasts, who had read his books during trying times in their lives, and who had listened to his radio wisdom on rough mornings, all came forward to demonstrate that Steve had never walked alone and he never would. Social media became a living memorial. Thousands submitted old video recordings of Steve Harvey's most hilarious moments, shared their favorite phrases from him, and related anecdotes of how he gave them strength in their own life. Stories like these came in by the minute, honest, genuine, and heartfelt. Prayer vigils started to form outside churches, schools, and community centers, and some lit candles. One woman wrote, "When I was going through depression, Steve's words reminded me that I still had a purpose." Another man shared, "Listening to his radio show helped me get through the worst years of my life." Celebrities joined in, not for the attention, but because they were fans like everyone else. And hashtags like #PraiseForSteveHarvey, #WoveYouSteve, and #HarvardStrong reached millions of people. Others stood in circles holding hands and praying for Steve's recovery. One group of students even planned a Laugh for Steve Day, where they watched his stand-up specials in school to honor the joy he gave the world. Steve Harvey was more than just a comedian or host. He was family to millions of people. In a noisy world, Steve had always been the voice of reason, faith, and laughter. Now the world was returning that love tenfold. Even strangers who had never met him felt a personal connection. The most powerful part of this story may be the realization that one life lived with honesty and heart can touch so many others. Even pastors, athletes, and regular people who are not in the entertainment industry took the time to pay tribute to him. People remembered his good deeds, many of which were unknown to the general public. He reportedly mentored young artists without requesting credit, called up fellow celebrities at difficult times to cheer them up, and discreetly paid rent for poor families. Steve was more than just a celebrity to a lot of people. He was a representation of love, faith, and tenacity. His own audience gave the most heartfelt homage. Global fans number in the millions. From barbershops to comedy clubs, from church groups to schools, people recalled how Steve's words gave them hope when life looked bleak, helped them laugh during sadness, and helped them trust in themselves after setbacks. His influence went beyond amusement. It was genuine, intimate, and heartfelt. Despite the battle of his life, Steve Harvey's impact had already produced something that would endure forever. It became evident that millions of people's hearts already bore his legacy, regardless of whether he ever made a comeback to the limelight. A shocking news restored a shaky but potent light to the situation, just when it appeared that there was no hope left. Steve Harvey may have one more shot, according to a statement he made in private to close family friends, and later verified by his daughter Brandy. The family had found an experimental treatment being given abroad after numerous consultations and medical trials. It was not assured. It was something, but it wasn't safe, and it was worth a shot for a man like Steve who never gave up a battle. The procedure took place in a Swiss specialty clinic that is renowned for pushing the limits of contemporary medicine. The treatment was still in its infancy, but it had showed encouraging effects in a few individuals with related illnesses. The physicians were truthful. It would be difficult, there would be dangers, and the trip would be lengthy. Even though he was feeble, Steve was prepared. His exact remarks, according to family members, were, "If there's even a small chance, I'll take it. I still got some living to do." The Harvey family felt a new feeling of strength as they faced this new prospect. The bags were packed. The planning process started. Marjorie supported his decision wholeheartedly and was by his side the entire time. Steve had the full support of his children, despite their caution. They were aware that the voyage would be more than just a physical one. It would put their togetherness, beliefs, and feelings to the test. Wearing a basic shirt, no tie, and no suit, he sat in a modest chair and looked like a man who had come to terms with his condition, but still wanted to address the people who had stood by him for decades. It was immediately apparent that this was not a performance. His heart was speaking. He started by expressing his gratitude to everyone who had supported him, loved him, and led him into their hearts, homes, and lives. "If you're watching this," he remarked, grinning slightly, "then I suppose I was unable to express my gratitude to you face to face." As he went on, his voice cracked a little. "A poor boy from Cleveland who God took to places he never would have dreamed. I'd had a good run, y'all. Better than I ever imagined. I don't regret anything." Steve talked about his family, his love for Marjorie, who supported him through thick and thin, and how proud he was of each of his children. He talked about grace, mistakes, suffering, and laughter. He reminded young people that there is always reason to smile, and that they should persevere no matter how difficult life becomes. He chuckled softly as he reflected on his early days in comedy, the setbacks, the second chances, and the subsequent benefits. Perhaps the most impactful moment, though, was when he stated, "Don't cry for me, celebrate me, laugh a little louder, love a little harder, live a little better. That's what I want you to do." His words felt less like a farewell and more like a parting gift as he gazed directly into the camera. A final word of wisdom from a man who dedicated his life to uplifting others. The screen went black as the video came to a close, leaving just tears and stillness. Love, sorrow, and profound admiration started to flow in from all across the entertainment business as word of Steve Harvey's illness and his heartfelt parting message circulated around the globe. On and off screen, social media became a living memorial to the man who had impacted so many lives. Celebrities, comedians, musicians, and television personalities started sharing personal anecdotes about Steve on social media, expressing how much he meant to them as a father figure, friend, and mentor in addition to being a well-known person. One of Steve's closest friends and a founding member of the Kings of Comedy, Haley, shared a heartfelt video on social media, stating, "Steve was the big brother I never had. He taught me what it means to be a man on stage and off stage." Kevin Hart called him a trailblazer who opened doors for every young comic after him. Oprah Winfrey sent a heartfelt tribute characterizing Steve as a voice of wisdom, laughter, and light. "When I didn't believe in myself, he believed in me. He started to lose more to the sickness, his strength, his vitality, and ultimately his capacity to work without stress." Recently, doctors had given the news that nobody ever wants to hear. The illness was developing more quickly than anticipated. Options were becoming more limited, and treatments weren't working as planned. Steve, however, refused to allow the sickness define him and remained optimistic and will to fight. He would tell his family to remain strong, smile despite the agony, and be there when he could. However, he and those closest to him realized in private that the path ahead would not be simple. Steve had weathered the storm with dignity, even though it was silent. The world was only now starting to realize how strong it had been to accomplish this. The emotional toll on Steve Harvey's family grew more profound than anyone outside of the family could comprehend as his health continued to deteriorate behind closed doors. Marjorie, his wife, who had always supported him with dignity and silent fortitude, was suddenly in a position she never would have thought to be in, watching the love of her life battle a problem she was unable to resolve. During these difficult times, their already strong friendship became even stronger. Marjorie became his rock, holding his hand during the difficult nights, talking to physicians when he was unable to, and praying for a miracle non-stop. Their kids were also profoundly impacted. Even though they were mature and strong in their own right, nothing could have prepared them for the physical fragility of their father, whom they had always seen as larger than life. Steve has always been the one to give them guidance and demonstrate how to remain strong in the face of adversity. The roles were now inverted. His children showered him with affection, stayed by his side, canceled work commitments, and did everything in their power to cheer him up. Steve's favorite thing to do was laugh, so they made sure to do that every day while sharing tales and watching old films. However, there were also quiet times. In the recesses of hospital rooms, there were moments of panic, tears, and hushed prayers. The most difficult aspect was the uncertainty. Every wonderful night seemed heavier since we had no idea what the future held. To get through, the family turned to their faith, one another, and the recollections of better times. They were just a husband, wife, and kids clinging to hope and doing their hardest to remain courageous for the guy who had always been their rock. Even though the outside world perceived them as a strong and powerful family, a video that no one had anticipated appeared online just as the world was struggling to process the devastating news. Steve Harvey himself had left a pre-recorded message. Steve's voice was deep but calm, the room was quiet, and the lighting was soft. Fans became even more nervous as a result. The cadence of amusement that Steve Harvey brought to so many people's lives was missing for the first time in years. There was no doubt that something was off, but nobody outside the family seemed to know what it was. The Harvey family was unable to conceal the truth any longer after days of mounting rumors, silence, and growing anxiety from followers worldwide. Millions of people were moved by the family's heartfelt statement, which was released on a calm morning without any prior notice or build-up. Although the words were straightforward, the burden they bore was intolerable. Things had suddenly gotten worse for Steve Harvey, who was fighting a very painful and personal battle. This was an unfathomable moment of grief for a man who had dedicated his life to making people laugh. The family didn't use a costly publicist or a news conference to spread their message. It was heartfelt. While expressing gratitude to the fans for their love and support, they also requested their privacy at this extremely delicate period. They clarified that although Steve had been coping with severe health problems for a while, he had decided to keep them to himself so he could carry on doing what he loved without bothering others. However, the illness had now gotten worse than they could handle on their own. Later that night, Steve's wife, Marjorie, spoke quietly via video message. Heartbreak now weighed heavily on her eyes, which were normally bright and strong. Watching someone so strong begin to fade is something no family could ever prepare for, she said, describing the last few weeks as the most difficult of their life. Many people were moved to tears by her remarks, particularly those who had admired Steve as a man of faith, tenacity, and love in addition to his fame. At last, the quiet had been disturbed. It was much harder to hear what came next. Steve Harvey had been silently battling a struggle that few people were aware of behind the cameras. The laughs and the well-maintained suits. He had been silently bearing the burden of a severe medical condition for months, maybe even years. He never allowed it to show on his face or get in the way of his work. He was seeing physicians, getting tested, and discreetly managing agony that most people could never fathom. All the while, audiences applauded at his quips and marveled at his intelligence. He kept it a secret from everyone save his wife, Marjorie, and a very small group of dependable family members. The illness had begun subtly. Initially, it was just exhaustion and the odd bout of vertigo. Next followed the memory loss, the weight loss, and the late-night hospital stays that were meticulously concealed from the public. Steve had no desire for sympathy. He did not wish to be perceived differently. The strong one had always been him, the voice that lifted people out of their lowest points, the leader and the motivator. It started with whispers concerned fans asking, "Where is Steve Harvey?" No updates, no appearances, not even a post. And then, just moments ago, the Harvey family broke their silence. What they confirmed was worse than anyone imagined. The truth that had been quietly feared is now heartbreakingly real. A wave of shock has swept across social media as fans brace for the news they never wanted to hear. For days, something felt off. Viewers noticed his absence from screens, his silence on social media, and the unusual stillness surrounding one of America's most beloved figures. Now that silence has been shattered, revealing a reality that has left even close friends stunned. In today's video, we're unpacking everything the family has shared, what's really going on behind the scenes, and what this means for Steve Harvey's future. Prepare yourselves, this is the side of the story no one saw coming. At first, fans assumed Steve Harvey was simply taking a well-deserved break, maybe working on a new project behind the scenes. But today, the truth hit like a tidal wave. In a moment of raw vulnerability, the Harvey family released a deeply emotional statement that shook millions to their core. This wasn't a simple case of stepping away. It was the result of something heartbreaking, something that had quietly been unfolding behind closed doors. For a man known for bringing joy, laughter, and light into people's lives, this news cast an unexpected and painful shadow. The silence surrounding Steve Harvey had grown louder with each passing day. The ever-present host who graced our screens with humor, wisdom, and unwavering energy suddenly vanished without a word. No family feud episodes, no radio updates, no motivational moments, just a heavy, haunting absence. Whispers turned into worry, and that worry turned into devastation. Now that the truth is out, the shockwaves are real. Fans across the world are reeling as the reality sets in. Something truly serious has happened to the man they considered family. Questions were posted on social media in droves. "Steve, where are you? Is he all right? Why hasn't he given us an update?" Like wildfire, rumors started to circulate. There were many who thought he had quietly retired. Others thought he was retreating for personal reasons. But many who understood Steve's personality were aware of this. He would never vanish without cause. His group said nothing. When asked about him, close pals delivered evasive, prepared answers. They would say that Steve is taking some time off, but there was something strange about their tone. Even his radio show's co-hosts began assuming portions without warning. Everyone seems to have been instructed to be silent.